All right, people. Positive Paul. Wednesday, January 24th, 2024. And quickly, once again, I want to know what happened to these MK Ultra survivors between the years of 1980 and 1983. They would have been young teenage boys between the ages of possibly 11 and 17. So the earliest birth date that I'm looking for would be someone that possibly would have been born after 1960, but more specifically, once this so-called MK Ultra experimentation was winding down concerning drug use, and then they switched over trying to figure out how electromagnetic energy, magnetic fields interact with the human brain. Delgado he was leading the charge, and around 1965, per his published papers, his speech given in New York City, he described a future where it goes right hand in hand with this so-called transhumanism. But again, it's where did these children end up at if they're still around? And I'm one of them. So the big myth of many, the big conspiracy, the big whopper, right at the top of the list out of all of them is the so-called Montauk Project. And what we have is we find that they were well ahead of the game, but remember, it was only literally two people, meaning Al Bielik and Preston Nichols. Duncan Cameron doesn't count. He sits there like a bump on the log, says very little. But they were the only two that all of a sudden just woke up after, well, being separated from the actual August 12th, 83 event by merely maybe, 5 years, because Bielik claims that it was the movie The Philadelphia Experiment that jogged his memory. Now, remember, there's no Montauk before this date, November 25th, 1989. I was honorably discharged 2 weeks prior over in Camp Pendleton, California from the United States Marine Corps. Keep that in mind. Now, this is how this works. This first interview where you see the three of them get together, all right, what happens is you now have, hold on, everybody. You now have the person, the individual, finally stepping forward the other day, trying to uncover the truth behind the Philadelphia experiment. Supposedly, per this video on Extreme Mysteries, with over 1 million subscribers, is where he shows up. He says his name is Bill Mills, or Bill Mill. He was the lead interviewer doing the video that day on November 25th, 1989. And this is in response to the week before my video, where once again, where are all these people? See, so what happens is this is a series of attrition, people. If I am the last remaining victim that's alive and the rest are dead, then obviously, one by one, they keep trotting out this myth that somehow the Philadelphia experiment is connected to the Montauk Project. Now, let's look at this real quick, and this is going to be fresh, all right, because that's what I do. I have information I've uncovered years ago, but I don't tell all you people. What I do is I put these little tidbits out, see who bites, and they're really dredging the bottom of the barrel. They got to drag this guy out and put him on Extreme Mysteries to tell the same story, but he puts up the same video, and the quality is no better than what's been going around the internet now for 20 years. So this is how this works. Long before Al Bielik, the Philadelphia experiment for many years had been looked into, investigated. Books were written, not many, but this would be one of the main books in 1979, The Philadelphia Experiment Project Invisibility by William L. Moore and Charles Berlitz. Now, this book doesn't say one peep about Montauk, not one peep about Edward Cameron and Duncan Cameron jumping off the ship and ending out on Long Island on August 12, 1983. But what happens is these individuals, specifically Moore, not Berlitz, Moore is showing up on the MUFON circuit to try to promote his book. Now, this is 1979 going into 1980. Now, hey, Al Bielik, he wouldn't even remember anything about the Philadelphia experiment until 1988. And when you listen to the Art Bell Coast to Coast on March 12th, or March 11th rather, 1994, Bielik explains that yes, this guy, William Moore and Berlitz, wrote a book, but see, they have a lot missing, he says. They don't tell the whole story, see, and he's going to correct that. So what happens is, these guys disappear. This guy's supposed to be still alive at age 80. Who knows where Berlitz is? Could be dead. I couldn't figure that out. I don't know. But they were never to be heard of again because Al Bielik was assigned the task of co-opting this so-called Philadelphia experiment. And you can guarantee they were doing something back then. You know this. All right? If you're in wartime, would it not be your best weapon in your toolbox is to be invisible? Well, yes, folks. When the wolf pack is out there on the Atlantic destroying all these merchant ships, of course, folks. So that's not such a far stretch. So what happens is, let's look at this, and here's some of their investigations from that book. All right, by Moore and Berlitz. For one, the date that Bielik claims is August 12th, 1943. But guess what? In this book, they stick to just what Wikipedia says. October, whatever it was, 1943. Now, there were only one witness. This guy, Carl Allende, that is supposed to be on a ship called the first Seth, and he saw the experiment go down, saw the Eldritch disappear, but see, they have it just disappearing, showing up in Norfolk, all right? You need to look at this book, folks, to wrap your mind around the lies, the scam that was pulled to cover up the, well, to be nicely, the experimentation done on these teenage boys. But the point is, in the book, they do extensive studies. They figure out that the Eldritch was in New York City, and it took off on August 13th, 43 for its maiden voyage. And the first Seth also was nowhere near Philadelphia Harbor. All right? Now, what they do is, there's records missing, but they were able to find a missing piece that fitted the puzzle quite unexpectedly. That the Eldritch was on their maiden voyage, whatever you want to call it, and they ran into a snafu where they dropped some depth charges over a U-boat. And the coordinates were given to where this took place. And on the day it took place, they were nowhere near where they were supposed to be. So that right in itself is very telling. And I'm not going to go through this whole book. You need to download the PDF or buy it because it's still for sale and you can see for yourself. But there's the one thing, the location of the Eldritch, where it was. It's not that this experiment didn't take place, it did. But where and who was involved? So this supposed Carl Allende all of a sudden shows up because there was someone else that apparently had wind of this back in the 50s and started documenting this. But amazingly so, he turns up dead, supposedly committing suicide. All right? And that leaves Allende, this Jessup character. So what happens is these two individuals, Moore and Berlitz, specifically Moore, their research, in my estimation, was ironclad because they had contacted the Navy. Now let's look at this. This is a form letter from the Department of Navy telling these individuals of, over the years, we have received innumerable queries about the so-called Philadelphia experiment or project. Now, look at the date, July 23rd, 1976, people. Wake the hell up. The genesis of the Philadelphia experiment myth dates go back to 1955 with the publication of The Case for UFOs by the late Dr. Morris K. Jessup. Scientist, PhD, astrophysics, yada, yada, yada. Sometime after the publication of the book, this guy Allende contacts him, and look, he's at RD number 1, box 223, New Kensington, PA. In the letter, Allende says that, hey, he gave details of the alleged secret naval experiment in 43. And Allende was on the ship called the Furseth, and he was a witness. But, strangely enough, again, this guy Jessup supposedly commits suicide, apparently after being contacted by this Allende character, all right? But what happens is the Navy, they don't come clean. They're not going to tell you what the hell was going on. So they assign 2 of their officers to follow up on this, all right? And the conclusion is that the Office of Naval Research never conducted an official study of anything. As for the Philadelphia experiment itself, they never even looked into it or investigated it. And matter of fact, they claim that if that technology was available, man, that would be something else, right? So here you are, though. Remember how Al always talks about the advanced studies over at Princeton, right? And here's a picture of Einstein and 2 naval officers 2 weeks prior to the August 12th, 43 date in Einstein's office over at Princeton. So Bill Moore, he, I believe, is a genuine individual. Because what happened is, look, MUFON was created to be the tip of the spear, right? As Alex says, right? They're fighting the globalists. We're the tip of the spear. He realized that something with MUFON, and he got involved with MUFON. But what happened is, boy, I tell you what, according to this article, and hear how he says, I resigned my teaching position, moved back to my family to Arizona, where Al Bielik was at the time, okay? And he wrote another book, Roswell Incident. But what he says is that at the time, the book was skeptically received by the UFO community and mercilessly panned by the debunkers. Stood my ground, broke with Berlitz, weathered the storm of rocks and mud thrown at my direction. But see, they took care of Bill Moore because he's non-existent. And now his thing was one of them was these MJ-12 documents. Now remember what I keep telling you people about the late 80s. Now remember, Bill Cooper is out there too, but he's like the lone wolf. He got involved with MUFON. They all do. They all end up on the MUFON circuit in the late 80s. I discovered that his first MUFON talk would have been in September in Arizona where he was living at. Now, I can't find the transcript or anything, but during the summer, MUFON had an international symposium that was taking place at the Aladdin in Las Vegas, June 30th, July 1st, and 2nd, all right? Now, Al was not there. So we know exactly when Al was up and running and got his marching orders to try to somehow get a handle on this. But when you read this MUFON journal, all right, right there, folks. I don't know if you could see it. It's MUFON UFO Journal, number 259, November 1989. So the point is, I can't go over all this stuff in a video because it's too much. And the point is, this guy Moore. Now, let's look at, well, not this guy. Let's look. He's another one, right? That he talked about the Philadelphia experiment, but he says, well, I don't know about jumping off the ship, all this time travel business, any of that. So, what we're going to do now is we are going to look. I went back and I read the Clay Tippin transcript again. And look, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm sorry. You got to catch up, all right? Because, hey, look, this stuff takes time. So this is Al Bielik's MUFON presentation at the Dallas Metroplex, January 13th, 1990, where he's up and running. And I already told this story twice, but now I'm going to read it from the transcript of what Al said in Dallas that night. And this is the thing. Once you invoke the name Aleister Crowley, well, all bets are off. The story I was given quite a few months later by Preston, right, was rather interesting. He said along about July, he was visited one night in his lab. Somebody knocked on the door. They said, Preston Nichols? He said, yes. I am Bill so-and-so from EMI Thorne Industries in England. I am their chief archivist. I thought you would like to know the story. He said, we've been looking for you, meaning they've been looking for Preston for quite some time. He says, Preston, what do you mean you've been looking for me? He said, I can show you why. And he showed him a picture taken of a family portrait of the Wilson brothers in 1890, along with a third party, Aleister Crowley. He is quite well known to people in metaphysics. Regardless of what you think of him, he was apparently a very heavy investor in the corporation, and he lived until the 50s. And the fourth party was a picture of my friend Preston, looking approximately 10 years older. So Preston shows up in a picture, an 1890 picture, and the story goes that he was the man from the future, that's what Aleister Crowley told the Wilson brothers. And what he did was he gave them the story of the Philadelphia experiment. Isn't that quite interesting? He said the story is that Crowley said that you were not of this time. You were out of the future, and you gave us the entire Philadelphia experiment story. It's been sitting in our archives. And now, all of a sudden, we're going to make a movie about it. Well, they went to the U.S. government to film on Long Island because they knew that the other terminal was on Long Island. The U.S. government totally refused them to allow them near the place. Interesting. So this is Al at the MUFON conference, and then one and only time he tells this story, folks. Now, before I get sick to my stomach, let's just quickly go along to show you the shyster, Edward Cameron, Al Bielik, the Illuminati programmer. Okay. Now, this is one of these, hand grenade, barn burner questions by an attendee at the conference. And he wants to know, you said that in 1943, you went to 1983 and back to 43. And when you came with your memory in 88, it would show that in this particular dimension, you were possibly somewhere else in 83. Do you know what I'm saying? You were in two places in 83. Al answers, true. In 1983, I, as Alfred Bielik, was working in Los Angeles, California, right? The electrical engineer. That's what these Satanists all do. They say they're electrical engineers, folks. I was a little far removed from the East Coast. So the questioner continues. Now, this is what I wish, Clay did this transcript over now 34 years ago, but here's where we are left wanting. Okay, so the universe is laid out like a hologram where you go different places in time. This is just another, we don't get to know what this is, just another what. So Al jumps in, you get into some very complex problems here in terms of time. And he points to Norman Levinson, all right? So there's your one thing. These people, they were skeptical of this story. And remember, there was no Montauk Project connected to any other Philadelphia documentation. So let's go one more. Okay, I have two questions. I don't know if you can see that. Let's see. I have two questions. One of them has to do with your traveling into the future and seeing the doctor that was in charge of the Phoenix experiment, meaning von Neumann. And he was also in charge of the Philadelphia experiment. You knew that you had gone and then you went back. You knew you were in the future, but at the time, the doctor did not know that you were in the future, right? It would be impossible. The 43 version of von Neumann know this? No. He knew in 83 where he was. Yes, but in 43, von Neumann didn't. Answer. Al says, no, he did not know a thing about it at the time. Al eventually told him what was going on, and that's why he wrote a report and became cognizant of the facts. When was the report written? 43 or 83? Al says 43. So we have some problems, all right? And they're very obvious when you do your research, people. Now, the thing is, Al Bielik, not much to go on. Okay, he's with Rich Jybros, Denver, Colorado, April 2000. And then he just drops off the map. He's still showing up, but we have no documentation of what Al did between the year 2000 and this picture, which may be between the years of 2008 and 2010. Now, pay attention. Here is Al. Supposedly, he's in a rest home, some type of hospice in Florida, and supposedly the very last Montauk documentary by this Chris Carantino character that somehow had access to Bielik. All right, this is what he looks like, but this is supposed to be the year 2010. Now, again, I'm not going to continue to state why this is important to me, Because, see, I have these Satanists. Their back is against the wall. They can't touch me. They can only keep me broke and sit here and stalk, harass, and play these little mind games with me down here in Mexico. Or wherever I go, people. I could go right back up to San Diego, try to get medical help for these implants, and I could document these so-called dopey American stalkers. We know all about it, right? The gang stalking, the Community Watch Snitch Network, right? These Benedict Arnolds. So here's Al. He's dying in a hospice in Florida, but yet he's going to give one last interview to White Phosphorus, these characters. And here is how we end this, folks. Pay attention. Al Bielik's Dilemma, Don Croft. October 2010. Al is in an assisted living facility in South Florida, and the front desk and mailroom are apparently blocking his friends from meeting him or sending him packages or mail. Hawthorne tried to visit him earlier this year but was ejected. So we just assumed it's a CIA-owned facility. Now, how'd this Chris Carantino be able to worm his way into this so-called CIA-owned facility where Al was staying in South Florida? Very interesting, folks. And I'm sure we'll never get the answer to that one. Now, I could go on, but see, Al Bielik's dilemma is every other American's dilemma. You just don't know that. Now, who was Don Croft? Well, if you know about Wilhelm Reich, if you know about Orgone Energy, you know about all his activities, I would say Don, he's one of those guys that got himself involved, very curious, upstanding, fine gentleman who just supposedly died in a paragliding accident in 2018. Very interesting, folks. How, all I can tell you is I'm still breathing, and the rest of them, all right, whether good, bad, indifferent, who knows? They're dead. They're not coming back. So the point is, Don Croft in 2000 and 2001 spent a lot of time with Al in Atlanta. This is where the Wingmaker story comes in. Remember, Al keeps remembering more and more and more and adding more, right? Between the 1980 interview and leading up to the Gybros one in Denver in 2000. So our big problem is right here. And this is how I wrap it up for you freaks on the cesspool known as social media. Al Bielik passes away in Mexico, October 10th, 2011, aged 84, by Kenadachi. I received an email today from Gybros. Bielik, he's dead. Monday, October 10th, 6:30 a.m. in Guadalajara, Mexico. Now, I'm not going to continue to go over this because I've already done it. Why was Al Bielik brought down to Guadalajara, Mexico, you freaks? And it's so, I tell you what, it just so happens, coincidentally, my little supposed stolen car entrapment scheme had me down in Guadalajara with these cartel freaks that work for these Satanists, folks, and they're all dead, too. Matter of fact, every single one of them that was involved with me back in between 2012 and 2014 here in Mexico, they're all dead or they're gone. I mean, the main one, cartel guys, they're dead. I've got documentation in the Zeta, the newspapers. Why was Al brought down to Guadalajara? How is that this guy's dying and you're going to remove him from the location that can provide the best health care? All right? See, it's a crock of shit. And here people are still trying to intellectually explain away these Satanists, that they got something figured out. And yes, We've all been put in this position. And if we could have some unity, get together all on the same page and put our differences behind us, then we can move forward. If these freaks that aren't human, they're in charge, their control mechanism is the money, and then their lies, this backwards ass Babylonian satanic usury system of servitude, which nobody can break free from. And if you do break free from, you will live in poverty. You will live until your very last breath, being tired, hungry. In some cases, wow, unless you have the power of Hamashiach, Yeshua, Jesus Christ. His truth is inside you. His very existence, his being is part of you. And you know that this is just one big sham, and that you live in a world full of weaselly little cowardly Benedict Arnolds that are just waiting to die. Oh yeah, my stocks, wow, you should see them. Just amazing, right? Everybody's counting all their little supposed credits, right? Staring at your computers, trying to figure out what your accounts, if they're going up or down. Well, here's my prediction, my prophecy. Every single living human being, if you're in my age group, there's no retirement. All your little numbers, your little stacks of papers that say you have this, you have that, it's all going to disappear. Poof.